Ask a mother what the worst part is. She will not say the phone call. She will say everything after. The file she is not permitted to read. The calls that stop being returned. Mississippi has asked a lot of mothers to wait. In 1955, a 14-year-old from Chicago was pulled from the Tallahatchie River. His mother refused to close the casket. A jury took about an hour to decide no one was responsible. 71 years later, the waiting has not ended. Last September, football players on a morning run found 21-year-old Trey Reed at the center of the Delta State campus, 50 miles from that river. The state ruled it a suicide. His family paid for their own examination. This month, neighbors in Jackson found 29-year-old Tasia Fortune behind a vacant house on a street called Road of Remembrance. Police will not say whether they suspect foul play. Her autopsy has not been released. And on the morning of July 6th, on a barrier island 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, a body surfaced at the northwest tip. He was 18. 2 days earlier, he had gone out on the water with friends for the 4th of July. Everyone on those boats came home, everyone except him. His name was Nolan Wells. 2 pathologists have examined his body. Neither can tell you how he died. The state's report is finished, and it is sealed. No one has been arrested. No one has been cleared. More than a month later, his mother still does not know what happened to her child. For 4 weeks, everyone with a microphone had something to say about him. A fake toxicology report circulated until the state had to denounce it publicly. AI-generated videos of his family spread until his mother began flagging them herself. Millions of views were earned on a boy who cannot correct the record about himself. One voice stayed out of it. Umar Johnson said nothing for a month. This week he explained why. He had watched Ferguson, he had watched Baltimore. He did not want to be one more person arriving at a family's worst moment with a camera. Then he spoke for over an hour. What he delivered was not a eulogy. It was a list. Questions about the boats, about a phone that did not stay with its owner, about a distress call placed in the window Nolan Wells was last seen alive, about tissue that never reached a second examination table. Some of it holds up against the record. Some of it we could not confirm, and we will tell you which parts and why. No charges have been filed, and everyone named here is entitled to the presumption of innocence. But those questions were asked out loud, and nobody in Jackson County has answered them. Horn Island is not a destination. It is a strip of sand and pine 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, part of a federally protected seashore. No houses, no roads, no power. Nobody lives there and nobody can. You arrive by boat or you do not arrive, and when the boats leave, whoever is standing on that beach is alone with the Gulf. Before we go any further, I want us to watch the interview in Umar Johnson's own words. Watch it carefully, because your opinion of this case will change while it plays, and it should. He raises questions the Jackson County Sheriff's Department has not answered, and some of them are the sharpest questions anyone has put to this investigation. But listen to what he is asserting, and listen to what he is asking, because they are not the same thing, and the difference is the entire reason this video exists. When it ends, we go through every claim he makes, what the public record supports, what contradicts it, and what we could not confirm no matter how hard we looked. You will not get that anywhere else in this case, and after a fake toxicology report reached 1 million people, you should not accept anything less. Here is Dr. Umar Johnson.
There's so much I want to talk to you about, though, man. There's so much to get into that I want to get your take on. Nolan Wells, how you feel about that situation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nolan Wells. You know, when the case first broke, Art, I just kind of sat back because I knew the YouTubian struggle streamers were going to run with it. I knew the white liberals on YouTube were going to run with it. I knew the white racists on YouTube were going to run with it. And everybody in between. It hurts my heart for Sister Christine, Nolan's mother, to have to see so many people using her son's name and crisis and tragedy for clickbait. And that's one of the biggest reasons, Art, I kind of stood back. It almost reminded me of the Freddie Gray police unaliving in Baltimore back during the Barack Obama era. When Freddie Gray lost his life to those police in Baltimore, everybody rushed to Baltimore. They did the same thing with Michael Brown in Ferguson, not because they necessarily cared about the tragedy, but because they wanted to benefit personally from it. And so I stayed away from Ferguson. I stayed away from Baltimore, and I stayed away from the Nolan Wells situation for a while because I didn't want to look like so many other people who just jumped in to have something to say, to use that young man's loss of life for clickbait and views. Now that it's been over a month since he lost his life, I think it's okay for me to speak now. Now let's take a closer look at this, Art. According to what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and what I've read, Nolan, Warren, Wyatt, and Trayston left for Horn Island the morning of July 4th. According to Warren's own words that he offered during an interview with Officer B.T. Coon, that's Coon as in C-U-N-E, Coon as in K-H-E-W-N, Coon as in K-U-H-N, Coon as in C-O-N-N. So Warren did a sit down with Officer B.T. Coon. And as we all know, B.T. Coon is white YouTube's pet monkey. He's white YouTube's pet monkey. So Warren sat down for an interview with white YouTube's pet monkey. And he said that they left for Horns Island the morning of July the 4th, and that it was approximately 30 of them spread across 3 boats. Approximately 30 youth spread across 3 boats. They all went to Horn Island together. They arrived at approximately 11:30. So they left around 9-ish, 8, 9-ish, whatever the case may be. They left the morning of July 4th. They arrived on White Devil's Horn Island at about 11:30. So 3 boats, 30 youth, they went together. I'm not clear on whether the 3 boats came back together or not. That's another question that I have, Art. Did they come back together the same way they left together? Because I'm treating all 30 of those white youth and all 3 of those ships as crime scenes and as suspects. All 3 ships are potential crime scenes. All 3 boats are potential crime scenes, and all 30 youth are potential suspects. I don't know why Jackson County Sheriff Ledbetter or Jackson County District Attorney Mulrath, I don't know why they decided to separate the boat that Nolan was on. Warren's boat, I don't know why they separated that boat from the other 2 for purposes of investigation and analysis, because those 3 boats operated as a team. And since they went out there as a team, and it hasn't been made clear to me whether or not they came back together as a team, all 30 white youth and all 3 boats should have been part of this investigation, not just the 1 boat. That is my first big issue with this case. Who decided to separate the other 2 boats and the other 20 or so youth? I got a problem with that, Art, because according to the Cajun Navy, they have no GPS information on the other 2 boats, Art. They have no GPS information on the other 2 boats. Now let's get into this. According to Warren and Nolan's other so-called white friends, they decided to leave the island around 4:30. So they were roughly on White Devil's Horn Island from 11:30 to 4:30. That is about 5 hours. About 5 hours. Now, one question that has to be asked, Art, why did y'all leave so soon? Because they party on Horn Island all day long. Y'all didn't leave at sunset. Y'all didn't leave at sundown. Y'all left after only being there 5 hours? That's a little suspicious, Art. And I haven't heard anybody ask any of them, why did y'all decide to leave after only being there for 5 hours? Did y'all plan to only be on White Devil's Horn Island for 5 hours? Why did y'all leave at that time? But we'll deal with that later. So then let's listen to Javon, Nolan's other best friend. Now, another problem I got with this whole story, Art, is Nolan allegedly had too many best friends. I'm trying to find out, how does Nolan have so many best friends? And why did all of these so-called best friends leave their best friend on White Devil's Horn Island without his cell phone and keys? I'm trying to figure this out. So Javon claims he's Nolan's best friend. Warren claims he's Nolan's best friend. And Trayston allegedly claims that he's Warren's best friend. So did Warren have three best friends? Excuse me. Did Nolan have three best friends? Did Nolan have 13 best friends? Did Nolan have 30 best friends? Because if Javon is the best friend of Nolan, and if Warren is the best friend of Nolan, and if Trayston is the best friend of Nolan, exactly how many best friends did Nolan have? Are y'all making this up? Who did Nolan tell Warren was his best friend? Who did Nolan ever tell Trayston was his best friend? I'm not going to question Javon, because he's a brother. And I do believe that there's a strong chance that they may have been best friends. And I say that not only because Javon is a brother, Art, but I also felt that Javon, through the investigation team and alley-oop, with some of the answers that he gave on TMZ. Some of Javon's answers, in my opinion, kind of made it clear to me he actually cared about Nolan. He actually cared about Nolan. I believe Javon actually cared about Nolan. And because of that, I'm willing to say that Javon may have actually been Nolan's best friend. I wish somebody would have asked Javon, Art, to your knowledge, has Nolan ever called Warren his best friend? Has Nolan ever called Trayston his best friend? To your knowledge, Javon, has Nolan ever told you that Warren and Trayston were best friends of his? Because, Art, I'm having a problem with this three best friend narrative. Okay? I used to be 18 years old. You might have one best friend. You may have two. Don't get me wrong. If you all hang in a pack, you could have three best friends. But according to Javon's own words, Art, he didn't really hang around with them other guys too much. That's what I allegedly thought I heard him say. He didn't hang around with them guys too much. So if you got 2 or 3 or 4 best friends, you guys normally travel as a group. Javon seemed like he kind of spent most of his time with Nolan alone, just the two of them, not with Trayston and Warren. Although he knew them, it didn't appear that he hung out with them on the regular. So how could they all then be best friends? It's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's unlikely. So, according to Javon, Art, he saw Nolan at 3:40 on the island. According to Javon, what I heard him say to TMZ allegedly was that he had another friend who was involved in an altercation, and that he left Nolan at about 3:40 to go check on his buddy, because according to Javon, his buddy was on another ship, and the parents of whomever on this other ship were trying to get him off the island because he was crashing out. He never said who this friend was. He never exactly told us what happened. But he said, I left at 3:40 to go check on my friend on another boat because, quote unquote, well, these are not his words, I'm paraphrasing, he was kind of wilding out, crashing out, and he needed to help calm him down. I'm paraphrasing. He said when he got back, Nolan was nowhere to be found, and I'm paraphrasing. And Nolan's boat that he came on, Warren's boat, the so-called Big Daddy, the 22-foot Triton, had already left the scene. So according to Javon, I left Nolan at 3:40 to go deal with another situation. I came back, he was gone. According to Katie, the white girl who Nolan's white best friends are trying to use as an alibi in this situation. Okay, because they claim, and Warren said the same thing to Officer B.T. Coon when he spoke with him. They claim that Nolan told them, I'm going to hang back on this island and talk to Katie. You guys go ahead and I'll get back however I get back. Again, I'm paraphrasing. But guess what? We learned through Katie's sister that Katie said she has no knowledge of Nolan ever saying that. And Katie said her conversation with Nolan was between 3 and 4:30. So you know what that means, Art? We can pretty much conclude that Nolan was likely to have been unalived, Art, sometime within the hour of 3:30 to 4:30. I'm going to insinuate that Nolan's life was taken because I do not believe he accidentally drowned. If he drowned, he was forcibly drowned. And we'll get to that in a minute. If Nolan drowned, he was forcibly drowned. He did not accidentally drown. He was a great swimmer. Miss me with the nonsense. That boy did not drown. If he drowned, it was by force. So again, Art, all three of these people, arguably the last three to see him alive, except for those who took his life, Katie, the coach, and Javon, are arguably the last three people to see Nolan alive, except for those who took his life on that boat, allegedly. That's my position. So they're all basically cutting off around 3:30, Art. Remember, they made the call for the emergency CTO at 4 o'clock. Javon said he cut out 3:40. The coach, 3:30. They made the call at 4 o'clock. That conversation we heard, the CTO call, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that took place at 4. It sounded like there was some struggling going on in the background. Nolan could have been getting unalived while they were making the call, Art. Nolan could have been getting unalived while they were making the call. Nolan could have been getting choked out while they was on the phone with Cito. So again, Art, my position is Nolan lost his life somewhere within the hour of 3:30 to 4:30. Now, before we go any further, Art, I need Ben Crump investigation team and Sheriff Ledbetter's investigation team to have a conversation with Javon, because according to Javon's statements on TMZ, the police never spoke to him. And I have serious concerns with the manner in which this investigation has been carried out so far, Art. I have very serious concerns with the manner in which this investigation has been carried out so far. So anyway, Javon said police never spoke with him. Why? We need a conversation with Javon, not because I think he's a suspect. I believe Javon is innocent, but we need to find out what he knows. That's number one. We also need a conversation, Art, with the coach. Who is this coach that Sister Christine said contacted her and told her he had a conversation with Nolan on the island between 2:30 and 3:30? We need to find out what he knows. And according to Katie's sister, she is already cooperating with the authorities. But here's why those three got to be spoken to, Art. Not only so we find out what they know, Art, but did they see each other during their conversation with Nolan? Because Javon, if you was talking to Nolan and left him at 3:40, and if Katie was talking to Nolan sometime between 3 and 4:30, and if the coach was talking to Nolan between 3:30 and 4:30, Art, at least two of you should have ran into each other. Did the coach see Javon? Did Javon see the coach? Did the coach see Katie? Did Katie see the coach? Did Katie see Javon? Did the coach see Katie? Art, If all three of them are saying they saw Nolan for the last time, roughly within the same hour, hour and a half, Art, did y'all run into each other? Let me tell you why I'm asking this question, Art. And I'm not throwing no shade at my brother Javon. I like Javon. I'm not throwing no shade at Miss Katie McCormick. I don't know her. I'm not throwing no shade at the coach, Art. But the reason I need to know why all y'all put your time within the same frame and you may have not possibly seen one another, Art, are you guys keeping yourself out of the window of witnessing this crime by saying you didn't see him after 3:30? I want you to follow what I'm saying here, Art. It's kind of interesting that they all saw him last at 3:30, not after 3:30. Javon 3:40, roughly 3:30. My point is, Art, for all three of them to have the same exact time, if they did not see each other at all during these conversations with Nolan, are they pushing up the window of time during which they saw Nolan so they cannot be included in this investigation as a witness to a crime? In other words, Art, I don't think Javon had nothing to do with it. I know he didn't. But is he saying he saw Nolan a little earlier than he saw him so he can't be pulled into the investigation? I don't think Katie had nothing to do with the crime, but is Katie putting her conversation with Nolan a little earlier than it actually took place to make sure she can't be dragged into the investigation as a witness to a crime? Is it possible that the coach is putting his conversation with Nolan earlier than what it was, Art, to make sure he cannot get dragged into the investigation? I don't think they had anything to do with it. But they could have been a witness to a homicide, Art. They could have been witness to a homicide. If they did not see each other, if none of those three people, the coach, Javon, and Katie, if they did not see each other at all talking to Nolan, if none of them saw each other talking to Nolan, at least two of them are lying about the time they last saw Nolan. Are you following me, Art? All I'm saying is I have my suspicions as to whether or not this convenient 3:30 cutoff window, I have my suspicions that this convenient 3:30 cutoff window may have not actually been the time they saw Nolan. They may have saw Nolan closer to the time he lost his life. Now stay with me, Art. I want to back up for a minute. And I want to say this to Brother Elmore, Nolan's stepfather. And I want to say this to Coach Tracy, who I believe was one of Nolan's coaches. Brother Elmore, the stepfather, and Coach Tracy, the coach, both said on national television, Art, that they don't think race played a role in this at all. Elmore, Tracy, two dark-skinned black men in Mississippi, and both of them said on national television, I don't think race had anything to do with this case. I am disappointed in Brother Elmore. I am disappointed in Coach Tracy. How dare you help these young people avoid the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. federal hate crimes law, Art, by you saying you don't think this had anything to do with race, Brother Elmore and Coach Tracy. You are helping these white folks avoid federal hate crimes charges. And let me tell you why this is important, Art. Let me tell you why this is important. Under the federal hate crimes law, Matthew Shepard, James Byrd, signed by Barack Obama, 2009. Under the Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, you can go to jail for life. You can go to jail for life under the Federal Hate Crimes Law. So if you can go to jail for life under the Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, why is Nolan's stepfather and coach telling white folks they don't think it had anything to do with race? I still love my brother Elmore. I still love my brother Coach Tracy. But would y'all please watch what comes out of your mouth during this investigation? Because you are undermining justice for Nolan. I hope you're listening, Brother Elmore. And I hope you're listening, Coach Tracy. You are undermining justice for Nolan by saying you don't think race had anything to do with it. How in the hell do you know? How do you know if race had anything to do with it? How well do you know these young people? It was 30 of them, Art. It was damn near 30 white youth spread across 3 boats. How many of them did Elmore know? How many of them did Coach Tracy know? So how are you going to go on TV and say, I don't think it had anything to do with race? Why are you helping them avoid accountability for what they may have done? I don't know if they did it, Art. You don't know if they did it. They don't know if they did it. And they definitely don't know if it was motivated by race. What they should have said, Art, is what Javon said. And that's why I like the young brother Javon. That's why I like that young brother Javon. His mother, Sister Tashima, shout out to you. You raised a good kid. When TMZ asked Javon if he thought it had anything to do with race, Art, when TMZ asked Javon if he thought this had anything to do with race, he said, what? I don't want to answer that question. I don't want to answer that question. Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Or, Art, they could have said, I don't know. Nolan's stepfather could have said, I don't know if it had anything to do with race. Coach Tracy should have said, I don't know if it had anything to do with race. But to say you don't think it had to do with race when he was the only black boy across 3 ships, are you out of your mind? Why would you say that and help them avoid the Federal Hate Crimes Act? Javon gave a better answer than those 2 black men. Javon, a child, gave a better answer than those 2 black men, Art, when he said, I don't want to answer the question. And shout out to Javon, Art. He's intelligent. You know why? Because by saying, I don't want to answer the question, he answered the question. Of course, race has something to do with it. This is the United States of America. Race has something to do with everything involving black people. The country was built on the backs of black people. It's maintained on black people. We are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system, overrepresented in the unemployment line, under the poverty line. Of course, everything in this country has to do with race. And I'm disappointed in us, Art, that we are so afraid to call racism what it is, that we literally got people asking us, when a white person takes the life of a black person, do you think it had anything to do with race? When a police officer takes the life or shoots a black person, do you think it had anything to do? What kind of idiotic gaslighting question is this, Art? All white people are racist. All white people are racist. So we can stop asking if it had anything to do with race. If it's black and it's white, it has something to do with race because all white people are racist. That's just how it is. Now let's get back to this. Before we deal with the infamous Cito call, Art, I got a few questions for Warren. I want to deal with that infamous Cito call, Art. And I want to deal with Sister Tashima and Sister Christine's visit to Warren's home to get Nolan's cell phone. I want to deal with them 2 in a minute. But before I go there, I got a couple questions for Warren and his white friends. Nolan's best friend, and Warren even called Nolan his brother, Art. He even called him his brother. He said they spent the night together before they went out to White Devils on Island, Art. The night before, July 3rd, they stayed in the same home. How do you stay in the same home with somebody, Art, and leave them on an island? How do you sleep in the same house with somebody July 3rd and then leave them on an island July 4th? But I got a few questions for Warren. No disrespect. I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm not saying he's guilty, but I got a few questions for you, Warren. Since you could sit down and interview with Officer BT I need you to sit down and interview with Dr. Umar Tunde. So you can sit down and interview with Officer BT. I want you to sit down and interview with Dr. Umar Tunde. My first question to Warren, you said that Nolan is a best friend of yours, that he's like a brother. I have a question. If Nolan is your brother and best friend, why did you leave him on that island, especially when you all were drinking? Because somebody put a report out there, Art, that Nolan had been drinking heavily and was intoxicated. Of course, that allegation was dismissed because the coach who contacted Sister Christine confirmed that he spoke to Nolan between 2:30 and 3:30 and Nolan was not intoxicated. So they lied to protect their friends because white people are always on code, Art. Not a single white person on that island dropped a dime yet. Not one of them. So anyway, Art, they tried to blame it on him being drunk. So he was just a drunk black kid who walked into the water and drowned. That's the narrative they wanted us to swallow. He was just a drunk black kid who walked into the water and drowned. And remember, Art, Sheriff Ledbetter allegedly ruled the case an accidental drowning before he did any investigation. He ruled Nolan's death an accidental drowning before he did any investigation. As far as I'm concerned, that meets the definition of public corruption. As far as I'm concerned, that meets the definition of public corruption. But stand with Warren, Art. Warren, if Nolan is your brother and best friend, why did you leave him on an island without his cell phone and his keys? Why did you take his cell phone and keys back to the mainland? You left him there and took his cell phone and keys back. Can you please explain that to me? What person wants to be on an island without their phone? Help me understand that, Warren. I don't know of an 18-year-old who wants to be anywhere without their phone, Art. They don't want to be in school without their phone. They don't want to be at home without their phone. They don't want to be out of town without their phone. They don't want to be at the mall, the movies, the restaurant. They don't want to be nowhere without their phone, let alone on an island with no way to get off. You left your best friend on an island, your so-called brother. You left him on an island with no way to get off, and you took his phone and his keys. Can you explain that to me, Warren? While you're thinking about it, I got another question for you, Warren, while you're thinking about it. You said at 11 o'clock, you called Miss Christine to see if she heard from her son. Warren said, Art, I called Miss Christine to see if she heard from Nolan. She said she had not heard from Nolan. Can I ask you a question, Warren? If you took his phone, how in the hell was his mother supposed to hear from her son when you have the son's phone? Did you tell Miss Christine that you had her son's phone when you called her? I bet you didn't. I bet you didn't. Think about that, Art. He called the mother and asked her if she heard from her son. But he knows she didn't hear from her son, Art, because he has her son's phone. How can the mother hear from Nolan when you have Nolan's cell phone and you left him on an island? And I bet you didn't tell her you had his phone. Because if she knew you had his phone, Art, she would not have had to use Life 360 to find the phone. If you had his phone and you called her at 11 o'clock to see if Nolan was okay, why didn't you tell Nolan's mom you had his phone? Why did my sister Christine and my sister Tashima have to use Life 360 to find their son's phone? Because you playing games. You playing games. You playing in our face like we stupid. That's what this is. I don't know if he did it, Art, but he damn sure knows who do. I allege and I believe that all 30 of those white kids on all 3 of them boats know exactly which one of them did it, and the rest of them are covering it up. And guess what, Warren? And the rest of you 30 white kids on those 3 boats, Let me explain something to you. Federal hate crimes law, you can go to jail for the rest of your life in case nobody didn't tell you. Federal hate crimes law, you can go to jail for the rest of your life in case nobody told you. Guess what? The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, you can go to jail for up to 30 years. And if Nolan was unalived by more than one person, that constitutes a lynching. That constitutes a lynching. So you can go to jail for up to 30 on the Emmett Till Act. You can go to jail for life on the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Hate Crimes Act. And in the state of Mississippi, Art, if you are an accessory after the fact, not accomplice. Accomplice means you participated in the murder. Accessory means you help cover it up afterwards. If you are an accessory to the fact after the fact, Art, you can go to jail for up to 20 years, Mississippi law. So they can go to jail for up to 20 years, Mississippi law. Accessory after the fact, you help to cover up the crime. You can go to jail for 30 years on the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act because more than one of you probably participated in Nolan's unaliving. And under the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, they can go to jail for life. And this is why I need Nolan's step pop and coach to watch what comes out of their mouth and stop trying to help these white kids avoid accountability for what they did to Nolan. Because if the tables will turn, white folks are not going to try to help your child avoid any accountability. So stop the now. Another question I have for Warren. You said you and Nolan been friends since 8th grade. Since 8th grade, Art. But Sister Christine says she don't know none of them kids really, Art. She don't know them white kids. So help me understand how you are Nolan's best friend, friends since 8th grade. You called him your brother. Y'all spent the night together July the 3rd, the morning before y'all went to White Devil's Horn Island. And his mother don't even know who you are. And you said out your own mouth that y'all never hung out at Nolan's house. So how are y'all best friends? I had best friends growing up, Art. My mother knew who they were. Who has a best friend that they mom don't know about? Help me understand that. A best friend and the mom don't know him? It sounds suspicious. Why didn't you tell Miss Christine you had her son's cell phone when you called and asked if she heard from him? Art, as far as I'm concerned, there's probable cause he has something to do with this. Art, I'm holding her son's cell phone. I left him on the island. I took his keys and phone. And I'm on the phone with the mom. I got his phone. But I'm calling his mother at 11 o'clock. Have you heard from your son? And I'm holding her son's cell phone, and I don't even tell her. Art, this ain't making no sense. This ain't making no sense. And I want to know from Sheriff John Ledbetter, Art, Jackson County Sheriff, you don't have probable cause just off of that alone? Somebody calls somebody's mom asking if she heard from him while they have their phone and left him stranded on the island. And if you care so much about Nolan, Art, if he cares so much about Nolan, the so-called white best friend, Art, why did you wait till 11 o'clock? Y'all left the island 4:30. Y'all left the island 4:30. If you care so much about Nolan, why are you not calling his mother until 11 o'clock? It's pitch black outside at 11 o'clock, Art. It's pitch black. It's almost midnight, and you wait till 11 o'clock to call his mom and ask her if she heard from her son, but he's supposed to be your brother and best friend. Listen here, Warren. I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. And then I have a question for his dad too, Art. I don't know if you know this, but his dad has started an online fundraising platform for Warren and two of his friends. I think they raised $160,000 so far. $160,000. Nobody has been arrested. Nobody has received a warrant. Nobody has been indicted. Nobody has been charged. Art, if you are innocent, why are you raising money online? You ain't been charged with a crime at all. The state of Mississippi is doing everything they can to make sure y'all don't get charged with anything. So why are you raising money online? Why did y'all cancel your social media? Why are y'all lawyering up? They hired Donald Trump's lawyer, Art. One of Donald Trump's lawyers is now the three of their lawyers. If you innocent, what you need Donald Trump's lawyer for? If you're innocent, what you raising $160,000 for? It sounds like y'all getting ready to defend yourselves. That's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like y'all think the truth is going to get out really, really soon and y'all want to be prepared for it. Again, Art, I'm not saying he did it, but I definitely believe he knows who do. Now, we're going to get to this call. But before we get to this call, Art, I want to ask a question to Benjamin Crump. Attorney Benjamin Crump. I met him twice, Art. I met Benjamin Crump the day before I graduated with my doctorate at an Urban League conference in New Orleans. I presented at a workshop at the Urban League conference in New Orleans. This is July of 2012. And I flew back to graduate and get my doctorate in clinical psychology. We had lunch. It's a few of us at the table. We had lunch. Okay. This is around the Trayvon era. And then I met Benjamin Crump again at HBCU Delaware State University about 3 or 4 years ago at the Black Farmers Conference that was put on by one of the black professors there. She invited me to keynote the luncheon, and she switched me out at the last minute for Attorney Benjamin Crump. I understand it was a black bourgeoisie event. I'm not a member of the black bourgeoisie. I got switched out. I understand. No harm, no foul. Ben Crump gave a good speech. But here's my question to Benjamin Crump and Al Sharpton. Art. How long are y'all going to wait around before y'all call a spade a spade? How long is Ben Crump and Al Sharpton going to wait around, Art, before they tell the world that they don't think this investigation is being done correctly? How long before Benjamin Crump and Al Sharpton demand that the FBI and Department of Justice take over this investigation? Art, it's been over a month and we know nothing. It's been over a month and we know nothing. Now, let me say this, Art. There's several circumstances through which you can demand the FBI come in and take over an investigation. One of them, Art, if there is a suspicion of public corruption or obstruction of justice. The FBI, the Department of Justice, can come in and take over a case on the suspicion of public corruption or obstruction of justice. So you're going to say, Dr. Umar, what evidence do you have of that? First of all, they declared this an accidental drowning before they did any investigation. That's a cover-up. Not only that, Art, they never treated the boat like a crime scene. They never took a look at the other 2 boats. We have no information at all on the other 2 boats. Those 30 white kids should have had their cell phones confiscated, investigated. All their social media should have been investigated. Their homes should have been investigated. They should have all been interrogated. They should have been investigated to see if they or their parents had any connection to any of the white hate groups in the state of Mississippi. None of that was done. They gave the boat back to the owner, Art. They gave the boat back. The boat may have been a crime scene and they gave it back. Now, according to the Cajun Navy, another question for Ben Crump, Art. According to the Cajun Navy, they offered Ben Crump to put dogs on the boat and let the dogs sniff it out to see if anybody had recently been deceased on that boat or if there had been any blood on that boat. And according to the representative from the Cajun Navy, Ben Crump told him don't do it. So I need Ben Crump, respectfully, I'm not accusing him of nothing, Art, but I need Ben Crump to explain to me why you didn't let them use the dogs to sniff out that boat. Why did you not let them sniff out that boat with them dogs? Did you have your own dogs to sniff out the boat? Because if you didn't, why didn't you let them sniff the boat out with the dogs? The dogs can tell, Art, if somebody had recently lost their life or if blood had been spilled. He said Ben Crump told him no. I need Ben Crump to explain that. I need Sheriff John Ledbetter to explain why the boat wasn't treated as a crime scene, potential crime scene. I need him to explain why all them white kids wasn't arrested and questioned. Because if it was black kids and a white kid went missing, Art, they would have all been arrested and questioned. You know that. They would have all been arrested and questioned. And then let's talk about the autopsy, Art. Let's talk about the autopsy. So the Mississippi State Medical Examiner, they do their autopsy July 7th, right? July 7th. And then Nolan's mother requested an independent autopsy, as she should have. They send Nolan's body to Washington, D.C. When the black medical examiner gets the Nolan's corpse, Art, the throat tissue and the lung tissue is gone. How is he supposed to determine if Nolan died from being choked out or if Nolan died from drowning if he don't have the throat tissue or the lung tissue, Art? How is he supposed to do his job and y'all didn't send the throat tissue or the lung tissue? And nobody has explained yet whether or not the medical examiner in D.C. is ever going to get the throat tissue or the lung tissue. And I personally believe, Art, I personally believe Nolan was deceased before he hit the water. I believe Nolan was deceased before he hit the water. And the reason they held on to the throat tissue and the reason they held on to the lung tissue is they didn't want nobody to know that Nolan was murdered before he hit that water. Just like Emmett Till was murdered before he hit that water. Just like Dr. King's brother, A.D. King, was murdered before he hit that water. Remember, Art, when Dr. King's brother was murdered, Reverend A.D. King, they found him in a swimming pool. They ruled it a drowning. And then one of the paramedics said what, Art? One of the paramedics who took Dr. King's brother out the pool, Art, said he didn't have no water in his lungs. The paramedic said he didn't have no water in his lungs, Art. And plus A.D. King, just like Nolan, A.D. King, just like Nolan, was a great swimmer, Art. Was a great swimmer. They kept them lungs, I believe. They kept the lungs, Art, because they knew that those lungs would have provided evidence of the fact that Nolan may have been deceased before he hit that water. They kept the throat because it may have shown some trauma that Nolan may have gotten choked out. And then you got the red substance around the back of the head that the DC medical examiner discussed. We don't know if Nolan got hit in the back of the head. We don't know if the blood simply drained to the back of the head. But here's the thing, Art. They say Nolan was found face down in the water. Nolan was found face down in the water, Art. Not only that, Nolan was transported face down to Washington, D.C. So guess what, Art? I have my doubts as to whether or not the red, which is probably blood in the back of the head, the subcutaneous red area, Art, I don't think that has anything to do with the blood draining to the back. You want to know why? Because he was found floating on his face and he was sent to Washington, D.C. on his face. So the blood couldn't have went backwards, Art. I believe Nolan got hit in the back of the head, and it was that hit that cost him his life. It was that hit that cost him his life. It was that hit that cost him his life. Now, with that being said, Art, I want to go to Sister Tashima and Sister Christine going over to Warren's home, allegedly, to get Nolan's phone. So Sister Christine reported Nolan missing around 12:22 p.m. on the 4th. Sometime after that, her and Sister Tashima, Javon's mom, used Life 360, Art, and they tracked the phone to Warren's home. I believe it was Warren's home. Don't hold me to that. I believe it was, no, I think it was one over the friend's home, lady friend's home. I think Warren said they were swimming at a lady friend's home. Whoever house it was one of them kids who was out there on White Devil Horns Island. So they tracked the phone to this house, Art. And Sister Tashima said when they opened up the door, the house was dark. You know what a house was dark, Art? They turned the lights off so they wouldn't recognize nobody's face. When they saw Nolan's mom is outside, this is what I believe happened. This is what I'm going to let. Nolan's mother and Javon's mother are outside. How did they know where we are? Turn the lights off because they are not going to leave until we open this door. They turned the lights off, Art, so they could hide. They didn't know that Nolan had Life 360 on that phone. They didn't know that Nolan had Life 360. Now, Sister Tashima said, Art, it took them 15 minutes to bring the phone. Art, she said it took them 15 minutes. You know why? Because they was deleting his Snapchat accounts. That's why, Art. It took them 15 minutes to bring the phone because they were deleting Nolan's Snapchat account. And they also needed to make sure they had their story straight in case Sister Christine and Sister Tashima had any more questions, Art. That's what was going on. But let me say this to Sister Christine and Sister Tashima. My beautiful African sisters, don't you ever again in your life go to a home at that time of night by yourself without no men. Brother Elmore should have been with y'all. You are in Mississippi. You don't know who would have been in that house. You don't know what type of racist rednecks could have came out there and attacked you guys, and y'all could have ended up missing just like Nolan. And once again, they would have said they never saw y'all. And once again, they would have said that they never saw y'all. So please don't do that again. I know you was looking for your son. I know you was helping your girlfriend look for her son, but don't y'all ever pull up at no white people's house you don't know after midnight. Don't you do that no more, ladies. Bring a couple alpha males with you. Bring Brother Elmore with you next time. But this is what I wish they would have done, Art. Let me tell you what I wish they would have done. When Sister Tashima and Sister Christine got to that house, Art, I wish they would not have told them they knew the phone was in there. Stay with me, Art. I wish they would have not told them they knew the phone. They should have played it off, Art. They should have said, we want to know if anybody has seen Nolan. We haven't heard from him since he went with y'all to White Devil's Horn Island. And they would have said, we ain't heard from him, Art. And then I would have said, do you know if Nolan had his phone with him? I've been calling my son all day. He's not picking up. Do you know if he had his phone? And if they would have said no, Art, if they would have said, we don't know if he had his phone or not, you know what I would have done? I would have called the police and I would have told the police, Art, my son is missing. He went to White Devil's Horn Island with these white kids in his house. They have his phone. They don't know I know they have his phone. And they just lied to my face and told me that they don't know where the phone is and the phone is right in there with them. I believe that they are suspects in my son's disappearance and I want them all arrested. That's what I wish they would have done, Art. I wish they didn't tell them they knew the phone was in there. I wish they would have act like they didn't know if the phone was in there and just asked them if they saw the phone. And once those white kids lied, I would have called the police because they never thought anybody was coming for Nolan's phone and keys. They never thought anyone was coming for Nolan's phone and keys because they didn't know Sister Christine had Life 360 on that phone, Art. They did not know that. And I think it is so disrespectful, Art, so racist and so bigoted that white people are filing false reports on Sister Christine's nursing license, Art. She now got to go before the nursing board in Mississippi, Art. Nolan's mother, still grieving the death of her son, she got to go and defend her credentials because white folks are mad that she's demanding justice for her son. This sounds just like Mamie Till Mobley, Emmett Till's mother. They did the same thing to Emmett Till, Art. After they assassinated Emmett Till, they harassed his mother. They sent her all type of threatening phone calls, letters, notices. Here we are, Art. 61 years later, they doing the same thing to Nolan Wells' mom. For black people who think white people have changed, Art, it's time to wake up and smell the coffee. They are their ancestors, Art. They are their ancestors. They might be worse. They are their ancestors. And since they are their ancestors, we need to be our ancestors. Now, let's talk about the infamous Cito call, Art. So again, Javon sees Nolan at 3:40. The coach sees Nolan between 2:30 and 3:30. Katie sees Nolan between 3 and 4:30. I already told you I believe Nolan was unalived between 3:30 and 4:30. Now, our sister, what was her name? Jacqueline Brentley or something. Jeanette Brentley, Jacqueline Brentley. Forgive me, sister, for mispronouncing your name. But our sister, who is an audio engineer, Art, she went through the laborious process of cleaning up the background conversation during the infamous Cito call. She cleaned up the background audio during the infamous Cito call, Art. And during the infamous Cito call, Art, according to her cleanup, it sounds like they were trying to clean up an unaliving of Nolan Wells. You hear people saying things like, is he still alive? Did you unalive him? Is he okay? People are shocked, asking questions. Is he still breathing? If that tape gets corroborated, all the white young folks on those 3 boats need to go to jail, Art. They need to be charged, all of them. Whether you committed the crime, whether you was an accomplice to the crime, whether you was an accessory to the crime. Whether you committed the crime, first-degree murder, whether you was an accomplice to the crime, you helped them carry it out, whether you was an accessory to the crime, you helped them plan it, or you helped them cover it up, Art, because I'm having problems. I'm having problems with this investigation. It is too lax. It is too soft. And my question to Ben Crump and Al Sharpton, how long before y'all going to demand that the federal Department of Justice take over the investigation, Art? As I was saying earlier, you can demand the feds to take over the investigation, Art, if there is concern about public corruption and obstruction of justice. One of the boys' mom or stepmom, and I think it's Warren, allegedly, one of the boys' mothers or stepmothers is a Chancery Court judge. Another one of the children's parents is allegedly tied to the FBI. So, Art, if their parents are tied up in the Mississippi state power structure, if these children's parents are tied up in the Mississippi state power structure, you know damn well Mississippi is not trying to find any of those kids guilty of anything. You know that. Mississippi does not have a history of helping black people find justice against white people. That is not the history of Mississippi. It ain't the history of Arkansas. It ain't the history of Texas. It ain't the history of Louisiana. It ain't the history of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, or none of those states. So why is it Ben Crump and Al Sharpton calling for a federal investigation? That's number one. Number two, Art, guess what? Horns Island is federal land. Horns Island is federal land, Art. If Horns Island is federal land, Art, why are we not demanding that the feds do the investigation and not Sheriff Ledbetter? The island is federal land, Art. It's federal land. Why aren't the feds carrying out the investigation? That's the second reason they should be involved. The third reason they should be involved, Art, is there's a strong likelihood that this was a federal hate crime and a lynching. Very strong likelihood that this was Nolan Wells' death is very likely to have been a federal hate crime, and it is very likely to have been a federal lynching, meaning more than one person participated in the racially motivated crime. So I just gave you 3 reasons why the feds should be investigating this case and not the sheriff's office. Why is Ben Crump and Al Sharpton dragging their feet? Benjamin Crump, you need to have a street march. You need to bring all of the black militia groups to Mississippi, and we need to march on Mississippi. Your approach to this investigation is too humble. It is too docile. It is too meek. It is too soft. You are dealing with Mississippi, and you have not activated any street protests. Sister Christine and Brother Nolan are not going to get justice, Art. Sister Christine and Brother Nolan Wells are not going to get justice, Art, if Benjamin Crump doesn't activate a street activism campaign. It is time for Ben Crump and Al Sharpton to activate a street activism campaign. And let me say this, Art. Al Sharpton is about to have another march on Washington. For what? For what? He's going to commemorate the Dr. King 1963 March on Washington. He's been doing it almost every year. But Art, it's an empty symbol. Al Sharpton, listen to me, sir. You don't need to march on D.C. We don't need another empty, meaningless Democratic Party sponsored march in Washington, D.C. We need you to switch that march, Art. Al Sharpton, if he cares about justice for black Mississippi, if Al Sharpton cares about justice for black Mississippi, Art, he will switch the march from D.C. to Mississippi. Al Sharpton needs to switch the march from Washington, D.C. to Mississippi. And it should be 4 days, Art. It should be 4 days, Art. We should march in Senatobia, Mississippi one day for baby Cohen, who was shot and murdered by the police in the Walmart parking lot. We got to march for baby Cohen, who was shot by the police in Senatobia. We have to march in Cleveland, Mississippi for our brother Trey Reed, who was unalived September 15th, 2025, hanging from a tree on Delta State University campus in Cleveland, Mississippi, September 15th, 2025. So we need to march in Cleveland, Mississippi. We need to march in Senatobia, Mississippi. We need to march in Jackson, Mississippi, because what just happened in Jackson on Monday, Art? A black woman, 28, 29 years old, Tasia Fortune, was found hanging from a tree. Monday, Art, 4 days ago, a black woman was found hanging from a tree in Jackson, Mississippi. And check this out, Art. They said her corpse, her body, had been hanging from the tree for 3 to 4 days, Art. 3 to 4 days, her body was hanging. It gets worse, Art. It gets worse. They said they had to use a ladder. They had to use a ladder to go up on the tree and get our sister Tasia down. And guess what the Mississippi State Medical Examiner ruled it, Art? Guess what she ruled it? The same thing she ruled Trey Reed's death as: suicide. Let me ask you a question, Art. How many black people you know hang themselves from trees? I don't know no black person who have ever taken their life by hanging themselves from a tree. In fact, it's almost impossible to hang yourself from a tree. In fact, black people have been hung from trees by white people for over 200 years. So you mean to tell me the very method that has been used to take our lives at the hands of white people, we are now taking the method ourselves, Art? We are now taking the method ourselves, Art, and we're going to hang ourselves with a noose the same way white people used to hang our ancestors? Who does that make sense to? That don't make no damn sense. So now all of a sudden, when black people want to take their life, we're going to go outside, get a noose, and hang ourselves suspended from a tree. That's nonsense. And the Mississippi State Medical Examiner, Art, every time a black person is found hanging in Mississippi, she wants to rule it a suicide. You know why, Art? If you rule it a suicide, you don't have to investigate. If you rule it a suicide, you can close the case and you don't have to investigate. So Ben Crump and Al Sharpton need to turn up the heat under Sheriff Ledbetter's office. They need to turn up the heat under District Attorney Mulrath's office because they are dragging their feet. They are not taking this investigation seriously. It is too quiet. We don't know anything. Sister Christine don't know anything after 30 days, and Ben Crump and Al Sharpton need to go to the streets. Since you like to march every year in Washington, D.C., Al Sharpton, why don't you bring your behind to Mississippi and march? We need to march in Senatobia. We need to march in Cleveland, Mississippi. We need to march in Jackson for Sister Tasia Fortune. And we need to march in Ocean Springs for Brother Nolan Wells. And check this out, Art. The Attorney General said they're going to keep the toxicology and the autopsy report under seal. They're going to keep the toxicology and the autopsy under seal, Art, until the grand jury gets to see it. A grand jury is going to decide whether or not anybody is going to get charged with a crime, Art. And I have a big problem with that, Art. That's what happened with Carmelo Anthony. That's what happened with Carmelo Anthony. A grand jury proceeding is a relatively secret process, Art. You don't even know who's on the grand jury, Art. You don't even know who's a group of secret white people. A group of secret white people are going to decide if any of those 30 white kids on those 3 boats should be charged with a crime in the death of Nolan Wells. And we won't even know who they are. And we won't even know how they came to their decision, Art. We won't even know who the grand jury is. And we won't even know how the grand jury came to their decision. What is Ben Crump ready to do? What is Al Sharpton ready to do if the grand jury returns no indictments on anybody at all for the death of Nolan Wells? Will Benjamin Crump be ready to march then, Art? Will Al Sharpton be ready to march in Mississippi then? If the grand jury says this was an accidental drowning, case is closed, no indictments, what is Ben Crump and Al Sharpton going to do? Because right now, and I respect them both, Art, but right now, the way this case is being handled, they are too docile, they are too meek, they are too humble, and they are too soft. We need some street action. We need some street protests. We need some street marches. We need to raise up the temperature in Mississippi, Art. That's what we need to do. This is the state that unalived Medgar Evers. This is the state that lynched Emmett Till. This is the state that took the life of Baby Cohen. This is the state that lynched Tasia Fortune. This is the state that lynched Trey Reed. This is Mississippi, the state that tried to lynch Fannie Lou Hamer, the state that tried to lynch Ida B. Wells. When are we going to wake up and smell the coffee? Now, let's get to the infamous call, Art, and I'm going to wrap this up. Let me get to the infamous call, and I'm going to wrap this up. They called the Cito company at 4 o'clock. We already talked about the background noise that the audio engineer, our beautiful black sister, Jeanette Brentley, cleaned up. Sounds very suspicious, Art. It sounds like they may have been in the act of unaliving Nolan Wells when they made the call. It sounds like they may have been in the act of unaliving Nolan Wells when they made the call, Art. Allegedly. And guess what, Art? That would make perfect sense. You want to know why? Because the call was bogus. Nothing was wrong with that shit. This is my allegations. This is my belief and my allegations, and I'm standing on it. Nothing was wrong with the boat, Art, and I'm going to explain to you how we know this. Nothing was wrong with that boat. They made that call because they needed an alibi, Art. They needed an alibi. So if Nolan Wells, when Nolan's body was found, Art, if they were able to determine the time of death, when Nolan's body was found, and if they were able to determine the time of death, they say, wait a minute. Nolan was unalived at 4 o'clock. Guess what, Art? They could say our boat was sinking at 4 o'clock and we was on the phone with Cito. The phone call was an alibi, Art. The phone call was a decoy. The phone call was a bait and switch. There was nothing wrong with that boat, Art. So listen, we know that Mississippi is going to find all the audio engineers they can find, Art. We know that Mississippi is going to find all the audio engineers that they can find, Art, to try to say that the background noise cannot be corroborated or verified. You know they're going to say that. They're going to say we can't use the background noise. It's too much going on. We don't care what Sister Jeanette Brantley had to say. We don't care what y'all conspiracy theorists got to say. We had our own FBI audio engineers listen to it, and they can't make out the conversation. I believe it says what Sister Jeanette Brantley says it says. I believe it, Art. It makes perfect sense. They called at the time that they were unaliving him to have an alibi and an excuse. But guess what, Art? Even if they throw out the background noise, I believe we still have probable cause to arrest all 30 of those white kids. And I'm going to tell you why, Art. Let's listen to the conversation, Art. Let's listen to the conversation. He calls the operator on CETO. The operator says, "How can I help you?" And I'm paraphrasing. He says, our boat is sinking and we need a tow. She says, "How much water are you in?" He says, "We're in 17 feet of water." No. We in 31 feet of water. Art, there's a big difference between 17 and 31. There's a big difference between 17 and 31. Why don't you know if you are in roughly 17 feet of water? And why don't you know if you are in roughly 31 feet of water? You are on the boat all the time. This is what they do, Art. They boat all the time. They go to Horn Island all the time. Why don't you know if you're in 17 foot of water or 31 foot of water? 31 foot of water. But Art, it gets better than this, Art. It gets better. The CETO operator, Art, says, "Do you want me to call the Coast Guard? Do you want me to call the Coast Guard?" Guess what he said? "We don't need the Coast Guard." Art, if your boat is sinking, do you care who comes to rescue you? If your boat is sinking, if I'm sinking in 31 feet of water, you could call the Coast Guard, you could call the aliens, you could call the Snow Bunny boat, you could call whoever you want to call if my boat is sinking. He told the operator, "We don't need the Coast Guard." Who does that, Art? Who says we don't need the Coast Guard if we sinking? So she says, okay. She says, "How many adults are on the boat?" Pay attention to this, Art. We caught him in another lie. Listen to this. She says, "How many adults are on the boat?" He said, quote, "There are no adults on the boat." He lied, Art. Second lie. First lie, he said, Nolan said, "I'm staying behind to hang out with Katie. Y'all can leave me." Katie said Nolan told her, "I'm headed back to the boat because my friend's about to leave." That was lie number one. That was lie number one. You lied and said Nolan said he was going to stay behind with Katie. That was a lie. Lie number two. The CETO operator asked you, "How many adults are on the boat?" He said there are no adults on the boat, Art. Why did he lie? Why did he lie? She said, "How many people on the boat?" He said, "Everybody on the boat is under 21. Art, she said, "That was not my question." Art, she begged him to tell her how many people are on the boat. She said, "That's not my question. How many people are on the boat?" She said, "Is anybody breathing on the boat?" He said, "A lot of people breathing on the boat." She said, "Is there anybody living on the boat?" He said, "Yes, people are alive on the boat." Art, I would like to investigate her. She didn't do no crime. I want to know what made that operator say, "Is anybody breathing on the boat?" What made her say, "Is anybody alive on the boat," Art? What did she hear in the background? What did that operator hear in the background to make her ask him, "Is anybody breathing on the boat?" That don't sound like a regular question. And then she said, "Is anybody living on the boat?" It's almost like she could feel something was going on. I would love to know if those were standard questions, Art. I would love to know if those were standard questions or if she had a hunch that something fishy was going on. Now check this out, Art. She asked him a third or fourth time. He would not answer the question, Art. He would not answer the question. how many people are on the boat? Guess what he said, Art? Like 7. Like 7. Art, the boat only holds 8. They went out there that morning with 8. 7 Caucasians and Nolan. 7 Caucasians and Nolan. Art, they left with 7, right? When she said how many people on the boat, Art, why did he say like 7? Why didn't he say 7? It's only 7 people. Why couldn't he say 7? Why did he say like 7? You know why he said like 7, Art? Because he didn't know if Nolan was still alive or not. He didn't know if Nolan was still alive or not. So let me say like 7 in case he survives. Because Art, if you call me up and say, Dr. Umar, how many people at the basketball game? I can't count them all, Art. I'm going to say like 100. It's like 100. Because I don't know. It could be a little less than 100. It could be a little more than 100. I'm going to say it's like 100. But Art, if it's only 7 people on the boat, I don't need to say like 7. I could just say 7. He didn't want to give her a direct answer. Why didn't he want to give her a direct answer, Art? Because he know it should have been 8 people on that boat. He know it should have been 8 people on that boat. So he said like 7 because he didn't want to say 7 so nobody can ask him where the hell was Nolan. Nolan's life was taken between 3:30 and 4:30, and they know exactly how and who. They know exactly how and who, Art. And they took the phone and the keys to get rid of any evidence. They took the phone and the keys to get rid of any evidence. And if Sister Christine and Sister Tashima didn't go to that girl's house to get that phone, they would have discarded it, Art. They were going to discard the keys in the phone and act like they never even had them either. Now, I'm going to give you this one piece, Art, and I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to give you this one piece, Art, and I'm going to leave it alone. As I said, I'm very disappointed in the fact that Sheriff Ledbetter and District Attorney Morath are not investigating all 30 of those children. I'm disappointed that all 3 boats were not treated like a crime scene. Now, my primary theory, they unalived him on the boat, threw him over to make it look like a drowning. They unalived him on the boat or on land before they took off, threw him in the water to make it look like a drowning. But I'm going to say this to you, Art. I have another theory as well. I got 2 theories. That's my first theory. Let me give you my second theory and we done on this. There's a strong chance, Art, that after they unalived Nolan, they held on to the body overnight and dumped it the next day, Art. Or they took the body to one of the other islands around Horn Island and dumped the body. And let me tell you why I believe this, Art. Let's go back to Emmett Till. Let's go to Emmett Till, Art. Emmett Till was unalived on August 28th. They bob-wired Emmett Till to a 75-pound cotton gin, 1955. August 28th, 1955, Emmett Till was unalived, and they bob-wired him to a 75-pound cotton gin and threw him in the Tallahatchie River. The Tallahatchie River, Art, is a freshwater river. Horn Island is on the Gulf of Mexico. It's salt water. Salt water is rougher and more active and more buoyant than fresh water, Art. Follow me on this. Emmett Till got thrown in the Tallahatchie, bob-wired to a 75-pound cotton gin, Art, and his body made it up to the surface on August the 31st. Even though he was tied to a 75-pound cotton gin in a river, his body floated up to the surface in 3 days, Art. Emmett Till was 14. Nolan Wells is 18. If Nolan Wells was unalived and dumped immediately on July 4th, Art, we should have saw his body on July 5th. If Emmett Till's body can make it to the top in 3 days, tied to a cotton gin, Art, why did Nolan Wells' body only surface the morning of July 6th? I think there is a strong possibility they held onto his body, Art, because they were afraid that if they dumped it immediately, it would surface too soon. If they dumped Nolan's body too soon, it would have surfaced before they were ready. That body could have floated back, Art, before they made it back home. They all go to jail. They could have held onto his body, Art, and dumped it on July 5th or dumped it the morning of July 6th. Because according to science, Art, Nolan's body should not have surfaced for 3 days. Or, according to what happened to Emmett Till, it should have surfaced within a day. The fact that it took Nolan Wells' body 41 hours before we saw it, I think that body might have gotten dumped, Art. I think they might have held onto Nolan Wells' body and dumped it a day or two later. And that's why the other 2 boats are important to the investigation, Art. How do we know Nolan wasn't unalived on one boat and held on a second boat? How do we know that? How do we know a second boat didn't take Nolan Wells' corpse to one of them other islands and then the body floated back, Art? Why are we not investigating all 3 boats and all 30 white children? Art, I'm going to tell you like this. For that boy to not tell that CETO operator how many people was on that boat, and she asked him 3 times, and the fact he lied and said there was no adults, and then he still didn't answer her question and said everybody under 21, and she had to repeatedly say that was not my question. Why are you unwilling to tell her it's only 7 people and not 8 people? Last thing I'm going to say, Art, shout out to Tyler Perry, Terrell Owens, Colin Kaepernick for helping to pay for the funerals, autopsy, as well as reward money for information leading to an arrest. But guess what, Art? That reward money needs to be more than $175,000. Mississippi is the poorest state in America. 1 in 4 people live in poverty. We need that reward money, Art, to go up to $1 million. I need LeBron James, Rihanna, Tiger Woods, Venus, Serena, Kanye. Get that reward money up to $1 million, Art. We need the reward money up to $1 million so those white folks will start talking. $175,000, Art, is not enough money. We need $1 million. Guess how they found the 3 civil rights workers in Philadelphia, Mississippi in 1964, Art? Remember the Ku Klux Klan murdered those 3 workers? Cheney, Goodman, and Swerner, Mississippi burning? Mississippi burning? Guess how they found out? An undercover FBI agent tipped off the FBI to where those 3 bodies were buried. Do the FBI have any undercover officers operating in this case? Does the state of Mississippi Bureau of Investigation have any undercover officers operating in this case? We need some undercover agents to weave into the lives of these young people and find out exactly what happened to Nolan Wells. And that's why Benjamin Crump and Al Sharpton need to demand a federal takeover of this investigation immediately.